Welcome to FoodTech Stories. I'm your host, Megan Thomas, a marketing and communications expert who is focused on how emerging technology is adopted in food and agriculture. On each episode, we talk with leaders, innovators, and storytellers who are shaping the future of our food and food system. If you value our content, please consider subscribing. Today, my guest is Fengmin Gong, who is CEO and co-founder of Metafoodx. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. Very glad to be here.
Wonderful, wonderful. What led you to start your startup?
It has been asked by many of my friends as well. After I sold my last startup, which is in cybersecurity, to Didi, that's where we actually help to transform the mass transportation system. If I was going to do a startup, I was looking for something with larger impact than transportation. An opportunity come up when I was mentoring some young entrepreneurs. I got to learn that in US alone, and every year, we actually waste over 30% of our food from farm to table. By estimate, it translates to about 300 billion is a B in terms of financial loss. At the same time, we're talking about adding 10% plus to the greenhouse gas emission. That's when I knew I definitely found a problem worth solving. If I look back and my prior startup experience, funding a number of cybersecurity companies, including Palo Networks, and we already use a lot of AI, IoT, and technology to actually solve real problems. You can think of it as a food system sustainability problem. That's a problem we're trying to solve.
And the 30% statistic about the food that is wasted is one that many people are familiar with. But when you start to dig into that number, it gets really messy because some of the data it's based on is actually quite dated. So it's really an interesting area. We recently covered the topic of upcycling, which is another way of addressing this larger issue. I'm curious about why restaurants? Why did you decide to go into that channel as your initial entry?
The way we look at it, the larger framing is actually commercial kitchens. When we first actually approached the problem, we did a lot of learning with college and university dining.
Okay.
Because they have the largest scale, their challenge is really squarely on how do I reduce the per plate cost while the students are demanding more variety, healthy food. So they are really the front and facing this challenge in terms of sustainability, keep the cost down. We actually started with that. And then for restaurant, of course, in particular, if you look at in the restaurant situation, they face the challenge, but from a slightly different angle. Today, in particular for the bigger restaurant, multi-units, then they started introducing the central kitchen for efficiency reasons, for streamlining. That scale of operation challenge translates. And then the restaurant, we further learned addition to the direct cost, because the restaurant, the profit margin is traditionally also in general, they are very low. They do not have a lot of digital means in terms of helping them to get the visibility. That's how we see it from the restaurant. And added on top, actually, restaurant has been telling us they also want to apply our same solution infrastructure piece to help them to track the inventory.
Really?
See, we started with prepared food, but the solution is such that now we can close the whole loop from the actual ingredients to prep, then to serve. That's where they are able to connect the two ends together to really get into why their margin is low. Where is the issue? Is it portion, or is it quality, or is it in the prep process? They have the loss in the back kitchen. That's how the restaurant come in. So the restaurant definitely give us, I would say, the largest scale in terms of number of customers.
Thank you for the distinction about the commercial kitchen, that it's an important one. What do folks who run commercial kitchens, other types of outlets, what do they tell you about waste? Is this something that they're thinking about on their own, or are they getting pressure from customers or from other partners or stakeholders?
They really have two drives. They are always very aware about the quality. They know the quality, the experience is the king there. With our device, of course, the first thing is indeed helping them to actually monitor the food quality, discover the issue, even preventing, let's say, low quality food item from going to the customer. That's one of them. But then the next big part is the savings, because that directly speaks to their margin or if they can continue the operation. This speaks to the kitchen operation, where do they know how much, what's the demand, how much to prep, all the way to how much to purchase, to prep, to serve. You mentioned earlier about repurposing other means. All those means are very helpful in reducing the impact, large impact on the environment, all the waste, and also repurpose some food for the needy, which is good. But then none of those are as effective as knowing what's the demand, how much to make, how people are liking today's menu combination. Because the menu kind of lineup affects how much they are going to eat different items. So that's where we started by looking at exactly that combination, which menu item, how much people are eating versus how much you have prepped. And that's the one upstream give them that data for them to actually making as much and purchase as much as is needed. That's a critical one. It's a big part of their cost equation. If you think of the two big factors in terms of affecting their margin, total together food cost and the labor account for close to maybe around 70%, depending on different environment. And that is a big chunk. And most of that control is in the kitchen, in the food service operations team's hands.
Interesting. I think that's a perfect segue into the platform itself. So, what can you tell us about how it actually works?
What we end up doing is we try to provide this AI embodied operating infrastructure. The key is going to be, it need to be providing that automated data collection and monitoring. And that's a key piece. Anything requires too much of manual work, either people cannot keep up or they will not scale in the long term. This need to be a tool that easily slip into their workflow and actually blend it in, providing them that assistant, allow them to do the accurate forecast, actually menu by menu in terms of consumption day in, day out. That is the fundamental. So that's the first line of the capability need to be in place. With that data, and then now they can actually fine-tune their menu design. They can prevent the waste by deciding how much to make and improving their just-in-time kind of practice as well. And of course, end up with less waste and better quality. In the end, it all translates to quality and the bottom line. Bottom line is actually the savings. So those are the two. If I was going to look at our solution, the way we have done it, think of three components, but they blend into the kitchen workflow. Then the first piece is what I was talking about. It's this AI embedded scanner, able to track all those very granular menu level in terms of net weight, food item, and at what temperature in a particular point in the kitchen. That's the beginning point. That's we have an IoT device that can be deployed anywhere in the workflow that is appropriate. With that device, then now you have the data, and that data is distilled into what we refer to as intelligence. We know at the day's end, we know exactly what menu type is the most popular and how people are actually consuming them and what you had as the most leftover. Just two examples. And those get used as a insight for the operator, for the chef to actually even making incremental adjustment. And it's very simple for them. The third component is the one, how do we deliver these insights to the operations people in a very convenient fashion? We do this through our cloud-based dashboard. We have the real-time alert delivery to them. And also we support third-party API integration so that other system actually can get the data to make the right purchase. That's the complete solution.
A fully integrated solution. Yeah, you hit on a question I had there is, are you working just with their data, but it sounds like you're also able to pull in data from other sources, and does it work with LLMs outside the venue as well?
That is a very critical piece. It's probably set us apart from, let's see, today, right? People talk about AI a whole lot. AI for content generation, some kind of entertainment value. But in this environment, the first thing we leverage the AI is we have built this system that it will see menu item or see ingredients and it's self-learning. That is the most fundamental. What end up happening is if you talk to a chef or an operator in the environment, if you started asking them, says, do you have 20,000 images for me to do training? They'll say, come back if you don't ask that question. That was so fundamental. That's how it get them on board and make it like touchless for them to track all the things. That's one big part of the AI in this environment. It's really embedded in the physical kitchen environment. By this device at different stage of the food life cycle, we actually also know those parameters get collected, but also at different location, logical stages. That's what makes it very powerful, very location environment aware. With this data, so far we already also integrated, for example, with weather. We are always aware it's Monday through Sunday, which day of the week. All those are factors that are affecting this forecasting. We are able to leverage AI to actually build very comprehensive models. Now you can actually predict and automatically for them to say, what is it? If you plan for the next cycle.
It's lunchtime on Tuesday. What do I need to have ready? Excellent. Based on your customer base today, how many customers would you say you have today?
We have about 20 customers. We have about 85 units already deployed. And I am very proud to say we have raised some of the nation's top schools as a customer. They deploy across the campus, both on the East Coast and West Coast, across the campus, 18 to 20 some units in operation. We have seen in the last 12 months, we are seeing somewhere from 150 to 200% in terms of ramp up, in terms of customer and adoption. In the end, it's the return on investment and the savings they are able to realize. That's really get the operators very excited.
And you mentioned that you have customers who are potentially interested in inventory management. Can you tell us a bit more about the genesis of that emerging need?
We have now have the customers. We are starting with both, some of them managed by the food service contractors, folks like Compass Group, Sodexo. They kind of accumulate a lot of know-how for managing this. They want to know the best way is based on the consumption, then come back to the different ingredient needs. They want to do that. Today, they use systems for purchasing. However, they also know the data fed into the purchasing is by managers' best guess. That was when they see the potential. And then the second requirement comes from the restaurant owners. We have the restaurant deployment. This includes quick service restaurants. Think of it as Panda Express or Chipotle kind of style. And in that case, they can track actually every pan of food coming from the kitchen to the front and then going back at the end, whatever is left. And they get exactly per menu item every day of the week, what's the amount. Then using the recipe to translate to the ingredients. Today, they just go by POS data. POS is a sales unit. It doesn't tell you anything about how much of the actual cooked food you served give to this customer, if they are happy or not. It affects their happiness, but that is hidden. People just go by sales dollars. There is another missing link between their ingredients to the actual produced served food. They only track how much I spend buying fish, vegetable, and things, but they don't know how much of those different ingredients translate to the sold dishes. What the restaurant now are looking using our solution for this, including the individual restaurant operations and also people using the central kitchen kind of setup. They use the device to track every ingredients coming in and out of the walk-in storage. That gives them real-time inventory for all those important expensive ingredients. That gives them two things. Of course, one thing is now they have the real inventory, and with the food going, they have the forecast in terms of demand. And then they can know how much more they need to order one. That's one aspect. And there is a second interesting aspect that the restaurant owner realized, in particular the owners, between the things they bought and the things they sell to the customer, there could be things happening because either it's because of the less accurate forecast, over purchasing, and then things get just turned bad or just lost somewhere. They don't even know how it got lost. Now with this data, once we track the ingredients, they actually get the data, they put side by side, they can discover the lossage, even including how the back kitchen training for the chef, how they are doing the trimming, or it's a sourcing, the yield is not good. That's what get them excited in the restaurant from the inventory perspective.
Thanks for breaking that down. You had mentioned the API capability. Does that connect with when waste is generated for removing that to a donation to a food pantry or other service or for composting? Does your system connect with any partners like that?
The API today, the most common use, we have several of the partners, including Parsley, Seaboard, Yamex. Those are the kitchen recipe management systems. When we integrate with them, we automatically pull down the menu lineup of the day, of the meal period. We do all the tracking, and then we send them up the consumption per menu and the leftover per menu. That's the part, automate that. Although we have the dashboard, we can also enter those menus from the dashboard, but that makes it further automated. Today, in our customer, they actually indeed deploy the system to track a number of leftover and leftover destination. But we have not connected with either Too Good To Go or Food Kitchen in that sense. But when they scan leftover, they have the choice of the leftover destination. Today, the customer can tell us as the kitchen is going to do reuse, repurpose, or it's going to be going to donation, or it's going to compost. The donation part, we have a number of customers started tracking those so they will know. At Pomona College in Southern California, when they have the leftover, they would, today the most common two ones they use is donation or compost. Most of the time, the donation is the one because they know based on the regulation. If the food is prepped, it was in a warmer, it's not served in the front line, that's where they will comfortably with compliance and to donate. That's the amount they will track. And then the other ones depends, then they probably will not do donation. We have had a few discussions with the folks about generating alert or report to this whole food repurpose, recycle kind of chain. We see the benefit because today the food repurpose donation catch rate is still low. People really want to improve, but because of the effort involved and the other constraints, so that is still very low. We definitely see opportunity of doing it. Once we have the client operators interested in seeing doing more of this, then we just need to connect, figure out a way for the folks that are doing the repurpose and to actually get this data.
What can you tell us about the outside investment that you've taken so far or any grant activity you've been part of? Just curious about how companies are scaling.
There is a lot of learning. People actually realize how important it is, but maybe for the impact, people are still lagging. Although we see this not only directly addressing the food waste issue, but also it's dealing with a low-hanging fruit for the climate issue. We are glad that now we have proven, have a lot of customer. We are seeing the solution. I'm expecting maybe towards maybe mid of this year, we will engage probably more of an institutional round for Series A. We are still a seed stage, and we have a number of impact investors, CEOs, basically still largely friends and family with a few partners invest in our seed round. That's where we are today. In terms of grant, I want to mention one thing we are very proud of was last year we received a grant from City of San Jose. City of San Jose actually introduced their inaugural AI innovation grant. We were one of the 5 received as more grants. So we are very glad to be recognized and then to actually leverage it to help us.
You mentioned that this is not your first startup. What would you say are kind of your key learnings about running a startup? What are the 1 or 2 things that you have learned maybe once, twice, 3 times that you can share with our listeners?
It's definitely a steep learning curve. The kitchens are a very human environment. That would be the first thing. AI sounds exciting, but in a kitchen, it just have to work every time. That's one reason that when we made this, and we actually did a lot of learning, we have to basically get partners from food operators and get the experience, the chefs and people, so that we can define a solution that can fit seamlessly into that environment. Now, at this point, we already basically have with all the units deployed. Just by the end of last year, we were tracking over 4,000 distinctive menu items. And it was about people, operators have used the system to scan, tracked over 250,000 pans of food. And then that translates to roughly about close to 3 million pounds of the food. That is one of our larger deployment. One campus, actually, that's one of the biggest learning is the kitchen, the food service environment, very human-centric. So in the end, to kind of reaffirm what we think about, we have to have the aim, in the end, it have to serve human. And also you have to have human in the mix. That part is really the most humbling to end up with a practical but powerful solution. That's really the steps of the learning.
And adoption of emerging technology in food tech and agriculture is something I'm keenly interested in as well, because if you design a beautiful, powerful system, like you said, it doesn't fit into the workflow, or if it gets wet, it doesn't work, or it's too heavy for the operator to hold. Simple things can really stop these emerging technologies from actually getting into broad scale adoption. It sounds like you all are working on that, which is great. So when you look ahead to the next 5 years, what are you most excited about in the sector that your startup plays in?
I keep up with how AI is going. It definitely have a lot of profound impact on various industries, right? Over the next 5 years, I'm very excited to see Metafoodx to grow from the early campus adoption, right, to become a standard for the operation layer, because now we are already getting into restaurants, we are getting into campus, basically corporate dining, and we are also getting into cruise lines. I mean, just give you a few examples. I'm expecting the more practical AI and robotic applications to go beyond just content generation and feeling therapies, if you will. I envision a future we definitely can have a future-proof kind of food system, even anticipating the AI, where I think we can get to a point where each food establishment, a commercial kitchen kind of operation environment, we can imagine each one of them with a system. It will be staffed with maybe a human GM. You may need a human executive chef, and then maybe a couple of human experienced staff. You're serving people. That whole core staff will be supplemented by prepping and full movement robots. This is definitely a very real and practical, saying our aim is to have this powered by Metafoodx, the operating system. So we can serve yummy food, healthy food, but also have the sustainability at the same time.
Yeah, and you speak to the thin margins in this channel and how keeping costs down is so essential. And many other industries have obviously automated repetitive tasks like chopping and other things, right? I think it stands to reason that you would see similar adoption. I love the idea of the human experience managers. That's kind of beautiful sounding. I like that. I was like, that sounds like a really interesting job. So
When we talk to the food service operators, that's where we learn because it's a human business. Make sounds alarm in your head when people say, okay, we're going to have AI produce all those new recipes. I mean, reference is okay, but the recipe, if not the chef tasted, you probably don't want to venture into it yet.
that's a good point. It's fascinating. Well, I really enjoyed our conversation, and thank you for your time today and to telling everyone about Metafoodx. And your website is metafoodx.com, I believe, and folks can find you there. Any other ways that people can reach you?
People can also just drop me email. I mean, they can look me up on LinkedIn for sure. My email would be just my first name, Fengmin.Gong @metafoodx.com. I would be very, very happy to talk to people interested in food.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. I enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us today on the latest episode of FoodTech Stories. Be sure and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast platform and keep an eye out for our bi-weekly episodes. I'm your host, Megan Thomas, founder of Ladris 17. FoodTech Stories is edited by TJG Media.